Hi. Thanks to some requests, I'm going ahead and making a little bit of a video talking about finger knitting and a few of the specifics and making a little bit of a guide. This will kind of be stream of consciousness. I have a little bit of an outline, but I didn't really plan out a script or anything. I wanted to go ahead and start first with talking about more basic stuff. So this first part is going to be just basics. So move these off to the side here. These aren't going to come back in the video, so say bye-bye. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to mention is that this is, well, this is yarn. This is the Red Heart Super Saver yarn. You can find it basically everywhere on the Yarnspirations site. That's the company that primarily handles this, and a lot of other brands for that matter. They say it's America's favorite yarn, and they're, self-promoting here with, is it America's most recommended? But, I mean, it's reasonably good reason. It's fantastic for learning stuff because it comes in a lot of different colors. It holds together pretty well. It's pretty well constructed. It's actually a pretty decent yarn. I'll get into why it's not the best thing for finger knitting, in my opinion, but it is a very good yarn, and it's great for knitting, crochet, it's great for learning with, and it's relatively cheap. This ball, and yes, it's a ball, this ball is, at the Walmart here in Longview, is about $4. Because it's cheap, because it's well regarded, because it's actually pretty handy, because it's some version of Ubiquitous. It's at basically every store you can think of. Like I said, this is at Walmart. I have it at Fred Meyer. I haven't seen it at Safeway or anything, but I mean, Fred Meyer, Walmart, you can go into Target, you can go into pretty much any store you can think of, any craft store, especially big craft stores, and they'll have it. It is super common. It's a relatively similar price, and you can get the jumbo size of this, which we'll go into a couple specifics of the jumbo later, but you can get many different sizes of this, and there's a reason why it's the Super Saver. It's been around for quite a while. In fact, it's so everywhere, it's so popular, it's so ubiquitous that you can get more or less knockoff versions of it pretty easily. This is the Walmart brand Mainstays. This is functionally the same yarn, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. And further, you also have, this is also the Walmart brand, by the way. It also comes in striped versions. The Super Saver, it's separate. It's a separate label for the stripes and the ombre and stuff like that. For the Walmart brand, it's the same one. That also will come up in a little while. But yes, this is the Super Saver. A lot of my comments, a lot of my critiques, my comments about sensory things are going to revolve around this specific brand and how it compares. So, next thing I wanted to talk about was, as I said, this is a ball of yarn. And the first time I actually heard that this was a ball, I called these skeins, and that's what I grew up knowing them as, but technically in normal nomenclature, this is a ball. And when I think of a ball of yarn, I think of a ball of yarn. This is a small ball, but, this is the thing you think of, the trope of cats knocking around and, chasing around the floor and things like that. But this is a ball, and it's weird. I don't like the term, but I will still call it a ball because that's what they call it. For people who aren't familiar with yarn, I'm going to go through with a lot of yarn anyway. I'm going to go talk a few comments here, so you'll probably be able to skip ahead to the next little bit to get past some of my super basic elementary comments here. But it's worth noting for folks who aren't super aware of yarn, you can see care instructions are always on the label, and I do mean always, even if it's a terrible yarn. And this one, it says machine wash and dry, but then you have to read the label. This one does not specifically say in words, you have to know the symbols. Thankfully, this one actually says, like, something similar, but it also goes machine washing and drying, wash in water. It says 104 degrees, so basically cool, lukewarm on delicate, tumble dry low on delicate. this does not give you that much information. So some balls are going to be really handy, some balls are not. You just gotta look. Next thing is going to be the yarn weight. So right here, you can barely see it. This is a yarn weight 4. It'll also say the crochet needle size, the knitting needle size. It's great. They're really great for letting you know that, but that's for normal applications. So now, we're going to go over a couple of reasons why that absolutely does not matter for finger knitting. This is entirely subjective. Just throw it off. You can see right here, it's a medium, it's a 4-weight yarn, and this specifically says it's a knitting needle size 8 for its gauge, which isn't important to the conversation, but we'll just go by what it says here for the gauge. It says 8 size knitting needle, which is a 5mm needle for anyone who doesn't actually know specific sizes, but this is the Walmart one. Again, it also says it's a medium yarn, which, cool. It's basically an exact copy. It's almost exactly the same. Great. Knitting needle size 9. 8, 9, 8, 9. The crochet needle, crochet hook size for both of them says the same. And if you look at the pattern that's here on the front, it says it needs a size H hook. So clearly, you know, they're pointing out that there are the differences. But the point I'm trying to get here by pointing out these the knitting needle size bits is that these numbers, this little diagram here, means pretty much nothing for finger knitting. I would say the more important thing is both your finger size and, if you're doing with a kid, the kid's finger size. I have medium, large, hairy man fingers, so my sensory related comments, the chain sizes, things like that later, will be based on my hairy, medium, large, adult male fingers. Kids' fingers are going to be much smaller. Kinder fingers will be extremely small. Ladies' fingers will be smaller than mine. Many men have larger fingers than me, so the yarn size is a lot more subjective per person, and I have some specific ones I honestly feel are better, and we'll go over those in a bit, but for now, these don't really, like, these little labels here don't matter as much. And in fact, like, the reason why I think it's weird, like, these two yarns are literally exactly the same. This one technically is a little bit denser, so it has a little bit less yardage for the same weight, but we're not talking a huge difference. This is a difference of about 30 yards between the two, which seems like a lot, but in yarn, not as much. But functionally speaking, if you are going to use this yarn, you could probably get away with using this yarn in terms of finger knitting, because they feel about the same, and this one's about $1 cheaper. So it's worth paying attention to. So I mentioned the finger sizes and chains and stuff like that. I will get to those later, especially when doing the sensory part of this. But for now, just kind of coming back to, you know, where we are. Okay. So I mentioned the yards of the yarn, and it will come up. It actually kind of does matter. But for the most part, if you're buying the yarn to do it on a large scale, in terms of finger knitting or introducing like knitting or crochet, technically speaking, for the most part, you're not going to worry that much about the yardage. A person during sessions will never use this much yarn unless you constantly are doing knitting, crochet, or even finger knitting. But if you want to supply it to a lot of people, well, you're going to eat through it pretty quickly. Technically speaking, as I said, this is both cheaper and slightly more yards. So if you're just going to do some basic stuff and the sensory concerns that'll come up later don't matter, this would be technically a much cheaper and better alternative to use. But yards do matter. This is over here, or this one right here is, like I said, this is the Super Saver. This is a basic Super Saver ball. The one that's over there, the Walmart one that I keep grabbing, that is the basic Walmart ball. There is a Walmart ball of the exact same yarn that is twice as large. This is the 7. I think it's twice as large. I'm pretty sure it's not the I'm pretty sure this is not the twice as large one. I'm pretty sure this is the half-size one. But basically there's 2 sizes. And but this is the basic Super Saver ball. And like I said, it is 364 yards. Well, I didn't actually mention that. Wait, but still, 364 yards, 7 ounces, which doesn't usually matter, but it will come up a bit with a few of the yarns later. But like I said, this is about $4 at the Walmart that I regularly go to out here, which hopefully will be reduced here soon. But this is a different yarn. This is the Peaches and Cream, which the Peaches and Cream brand basically doesn't exist anymore. It's a weird specific thing. But anyway, this is a ball. This costs $1.76. It is cotton yarn. We'll go into some of the specifics about it later. But this is 2.5 ounces. Again, this was 7. And this is 120 yards. So basically, 3 of these equal 1 of this. And the price is going to be relatively similar. This will be a little bit more. But, you know, you just got to pay attention to exactly what kind you want. And what's going to be useful. As I mentioned, this is about 120 yards. This is, and again, $1.76. This is a different brand, but it's basically the exact same yarn. This is why I said Peaches and Cream doesn't really exist anymore. This is Sugar and Cream. They're made exactly the same now. They're owned by the same company. It's just branding. But anyway, you can get this yarn in cones. And technically speaking, this is marginally cheaper. And it is 600... I think it's like 676 or 678 yards. So you get more than 5 of these for one of these. And if you're going to do a lot of stuff, this might matter. Actually, can be handy. But for the most part, we'll get into the specifics of the cone and the cotton yarn and stuff like that a little bit later when we actually care about it. So next thing I'm going to talk about in terms of the the lengths. So I'm going to talk about lengths a fair bit here shortly, but what I have here are some little bundles I've made for when I actually try to introduce crochet to classrooms. I've tied this off with a different kind of yarn. I'll talk about that one later too, but like these are 5 yards. I wrapped it around a yardstick lengthwise. It's like 5 yards and maybe a 1/4 inch. But yeah, so this is these are 5-yard bundles. I'm actually making it out of cotton yarn, and I'll probably have some other colors when I actually start introducing it. But for now, it's just white and black bundles. These are little yarn balls. I've been manually making them, just winding yarn together. It is a super laborious process. It takes forever, and truth be told, I have no idea how much yarn is in these. Like, seriously, no idea. There are yards. It might be like 8 or 9 for all I know. And for a lot of different reasons, that is not helpful. I'll go into that here very shortly. But first I want to talk about, so these are 5 yards. These ones right here. I've been prepping to introduce finger knitting to a specific classroom. And so I've been cutting these lengths. These are actually 2-yard lengths, and these are 4-yard lengths. And I have a reason why I wanted to do both. Originally, I was just going to cut these and call it a week, call it a month, call it a year, whatever. But then I was like, you know what? If some kids really get into it while I'm still in the room, I can just let them pick some of the 4-yard ones, and we can go ahead and let them enjoy more of their finger knitting time. I'll be starting them out on these. And for kids that are comfortable with it and want to move on, I'll have these. I'm specifically making sure they have pre-measured lengths instead of doing this random size balling thing for kind of a real reason. And that is, I handed a ball to one of the students I work with, and we were working through it, and he was having a terrible time. He was having a terrible time because it's hard for him in the first place, but every time he failed, and he's a student that is currently working on frustration tolerance, but every time he failed, he got increasingly upset, both with himself and with the yarn. If it had been one of these where it was only so long, or even better, one of these ones where he only had to go through 2 yards, like it wouldn't have been that much. Oh man, you messed up, but you only gotta go for a little bit, and I want to see you make the progress. Honestly, I would have preferred using one of these, but I only had this container over here. You can probably hear the butcher paper because I got a whole bunch over here. I had all these ones already pre-made, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and introduce these kids. Now that I know the whole thing about the pre-measuring and the balling thing, I'm going to end up replacing all of these with these, well, not these ones exactly, but pre-measured lengths. I'm going to tie them off over in the other thing. They're not tied off right now because I just want it to be easy to grab, but in here it'll be tied off, so it's a lot easier for them to access. So the reason why I have the 2 and 4 yard bundles is because, so this is a chain that I made with 2 yards of yarn. This is 2 yards. Like, I know clearly it's not even like 2 feet, but this is 2 yard. This is a 2 yard length. Pretty much exactly one of those ones I have in the tub. 2 yards is great. This is great for learning. I'm going forward with this for the classroom stuff. It matters right now because this is a 4 yard one, and you'll notice it's much longer. Obviously, 2 yards versus 4 yards, that makes a whole lot of sense. It'll be longer. But it's not just a little bit longer, it's longer twice over. So, twice over, for 2 reasons. Probably the way I word that. So you can notice, if I pick the right side here, good enough. The tails here, and we'll talk about the tails in a bit, but the tails here, they're pretty similar. They're not that much different in length. Even if I go to the other side, they're not that much different. Originally, this one, both tails were longer, and then I realized that I hadn't tightened this up completely. So now the tails on the shorter one are actually longer, amusingly. But one reason that the 2 yard versus 4 yard kind of matters is, you can see I'm not exactly making this tight. It's recoiling back in on itself. This is the 2 yard versus the 4 yard length. The completed chain, which these are both 2 finger chains, which I'll talk about in a little while. Both of these chains, like, were preset lengths. We've already established the tails are about the same length. The 4 yard one is more than twice as long. And the easy explanation, in case you are curious why that is that these tails eat a lot of yarn. So if you do a whole bunch of 2 yard lengths, you're going to have a lot less overall chain length than you are if you use longer lengths. I wouldn't recommend for introducing it to kids to cut like 10 yards plus, because honestly, a longer yard length, a longer length to use to learn is actually not helpful. Like I said, that one kid that had the frustration tolerance issue, he wasn't even successfully getting past his like first couple stitches, if you want to call it that, and he still had a whole lot. The final chain was probably, if I keep taking this off the thing, it's probably still not this long. Like, it probably was longer. And he had all that yarn to go through. If I'd handed him a length that was only 2 yards, like, yeah, man, you're looking at a few inches, and then you'll have gotten it down, and we can practice with another one down the line. So what I'm probably going to do in that box there is I'm probably going to put about 2 yards, maybe 3, but about 2 yards, and that way we can get the practice, and it won't be too daunting. So not only will it not be too daunting, but like a half-hour session, one of these balls, unless you are just doing finger knitting for the entire OT session, this ball will eat way too much time. 2 yards, if they get it down relatively quickly, that's still only like a 5 to 6 minute activity probably. Maybe a little bit longer, depending on the kid, maybe a little bit shorter, depending on how fast they work or how sloppy they are. But, these balls, however long they are, like I said, it could take the entire session. Unless you have like hour-long sessions, which, can't really do that in schools. So I went ahead and like I said, I'm moving my focus on to these pre-cut lengths going forward. And so I really am enjoying trying to introduce it and figure out ways to make that work. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out, pull out this Super Saver thing again, but we're not going to talk about the yarn itself. We're going to talk about the ball now. So you may notice I've got this little bit of yarn here and this bit of yarn here. Again, for anybody who is not super familiar with yarn, most balls do not look like this. If you buy most like commercial balls of yarn, they look a little bit more kind of along this line, which they look pretty similar, just here, but they don't have these tails as easily grabbable. They usually only have the ones that wrap around. This one is the one that wraps around. This is the one that comes from the inside. Guaranteed, this is the better way you can use it when you work with kids, especially if you just hand them the ball and say, have a day. this is called, this would be, technically this is a center pole, but I prefer to refer to it as an end pole section of yarn, because this is a center pole ball of yarn. It is specifically wound to be a center pole. This is the Walmart one. The Walmart one also comes with the end pole or the wraparound, but you may notice these are basically the same ball. These were the same. This is the same amount of yarn, usage notwithstanding. This is a lot more compact. So I'm still winding my balls of yarn up into center poles because it saves a lot of space. The winder does not like this much yarn on it, so it's kind of iffy. Anyway, so if you're handing it to a kid to use, this one that wraps around can get really messy, because as soon as you start, if you're knitting or doing a long project, anybody who's done knitting enough knows that once you start knitting for a while, the ball's just going to start going all over the place, especially if you're doing something that somehow manages to go really quickly, like if you're winding it or whatever. That's not handy when you're handing it to a kid, because that's going to go everywhere, and I mean like everywhere. When I was in the preschool doing my volunteering over the summer, like one kid just had his ball slowly roll away and just kept pulling from it, and it kept going away despite the fact that he clearly was losing the yarn over time. So regular balls, like the ones that look like this, probably upsized, regular balls rolling away, very easy to do, and it's not handy. It can make a huge mess and be an issue. And this is a small ball of yarn. This right here, I love this yarn. It is fantastic, but it does that whole spinning thing. This is 200 yards versus the 300 some. And as much as I love this yarn, I can't stand how much it rolls around. You can put it in like a grocery bag or a little cardboard box, and it will not do the rolling away thing, even if you hand it to a kid. But like if you hand it to a kid, the kid's gonna be like, oh, I'll just take the yarn out, and then you run into the same problem. So I would recommend, if you're going to have them do it straight from the ball, make them use the end pole, or give them a center pole, or just straight up give them a pre-established length. So that's my little section on talking about the yarn basics and setting the general stuff up. So next bit is going to be talking about the sensory aspect of things.